Welcome to my video diary called The Irony of Social Media. Posting on social media while ranting about how you hate social media. The irony of social media. I got on here today because I know I'm not the only one who's sick and tired of this shit. And I'm usually not a negative person. I do love to rant. But I try to be optimistic about things. If anything, I do consider myself an eternal optimist. I've been called naive and overly optimistic plenty of times. But I just got on here to say that I am concerned about where things are heading. And I made a post back in January about starting a homestead and just asking around to see if anybody was interested in that idea, because I know I'm not the only one who's noticed this either, but things have been changing a lot over the last decade, and especially over the last 4 years since 2020. It's almost like 2020 started a brand new cycle, and in a way it did. Now we're in the 2020s. Hold on, let's flip this thing around. Woo! Yeah, COVID started a new cycle, okay? And it was the weirdest year ever because it was so polarizing. What I mean by that is that you had tons of different people who had completely different experiences while somehow living on the same earth in the same environment, yet our experiences were so different that we ended up losing relationships over what happened that year. You had people who, got COVID, got sick, watched loved ones die, and watched people suffering. The most thing about that year was that you couldn't even be in the hospital with somebody when they were passing away. Are you kidding me? If that doesn't make you guys livid, then I don't know. Where's your heart? I don't know. I can't believe we even as people let that happen. I can't imagine if that had happened to me. I would be climbing over desks, punching someone in the face. Most likely. I don't know. So anyways, you had that. People that watched death happen all around them. People that were forced to work exhausting jobs because they were essential workers. And then you had people who had essentially the opposite experience. You had people who didn't know anyone that got COVID, who thought it was a hoax and a lie because they didn't know anyone that got sick. They didn't know anyone that died from it. I love these things that I find. I like that. And a lot of dirt in there. Okay, anyways, back to my point. So those people didn't know anyone that died. They were non-essential workers, so they didn't have to go to work. They got called off, and they got to work, or they got paid more money than they've ever got paid in their whole life, like $900 a week to do nothing. I mean, I know that I was one of those lucky people. I was shocked. And a lot of those people, who had the opportunity to take time off, made use of it. Me personally, I taught myself how to sew. I used all of my stimulus money, most of it, on self-care, but also investing in a lot of fabrics and costume stuff. And that's how I got into, I guess I call it cosplay because it's costumes. I found more treasures. Hold on. Yeah, nope, not that one. Anyways, got into sewing and fashion design, and I became obsessed with it, and I taught myself how to do it. But a lot of people got into wellness that year, and COVID gave them the opportunity to get started on a new path. But my point with all of it is that you had people living people having very separate experiences and sharing the same world. And I think that is what caused a lot of conflict that year. What's crazy about it all, especially when it comes down to the vax and all that, and people's opinions on that, you lost entire family relationships were destroyed. You had people saying awful things to their family and their loved ones, I hope you. Actually, I don't think they said that. I don't know why I said that. I just saw a shirt, so Another desert find. Probably full of cacti. That's a shame because this is actually a pretty cool shirt. Hold on. Desert finds. Ooh. Some moon maiden. I don't know if you're going to get the cacti out of that. Let's be real. Is that a spider? Probably. Anyways, I'm taking back my bullet. Think about picking that up later. Anyways, polarizing experiences. People losing relationships over what was happening. People who still probably don't speak to their family to this day. And people believing so much that what they were saying was right that they were willing to lose those relationships. So what are we learning? What did we learn from this? Did we learn anything? This is what I learned. Who am I to try to convince anyone to see things the way that I see them? I don't think it's worth losing relationships. I think everybody is entitled to believe what they want. And, you know, that is a double-edged sword to think that way too, because when we were all fear-mongered into believing that the unvaccinated were going to, you know, spread diseases and kill everyone. And now there's information coming out 4 years later where a lot of people that were over-vaccinated are having a lot of health problems. We're seeing a lot of turbo cancers in people in their 30s. Maybe that's misinformation. I don't know. I just have some people close to me that happened to. And there's, you know, probably no correlation. Who the knows? That's my point, though. Who knows? There's so much information these days. We cannot properly sift through it. And you can be one person who's seeing X, Y, and Z on the algorithm. You're, you know, the last, since 2012, 2014, when all of the, you know, when cell phones suddenly became this thing that, whoo, love birds. Yeah, so cell phones became a thing that were these handheld devices that we can't put down. So those people, you know, been on your cell phone since 2014. Now there's these algorithms that are just showing you things that appeal to you. So it's things that you've already clicked on. So it's making you super polarized in what you think, what you feel, what you believe. And then there's people who have opposite experiences because they click on things that are totally different. So, you know, what you call misinformation might be, you know, reality to somebody else based on, you know, their 10 years of research or whatever they've been showed and programmed with. That's what's happening. We're being programmed by what we see, and it's becoming a problem. Like, of course, there's great things about social media. On the plus side, it connects us to people that we never would have had access to, you know, however, thousands or hundreds or even decades ago. But now we can connect with people and somehow stay in touch with people that we went to high school with. But nothing against those people, but in some cases, like, why would you want to? Why do you care what somebody who you met when you were 18 like thinks about your life? But now they have access to everything. And let's be honest, they have access to mostly our highlight reels, not necessarily even, you know, the real stuff that we go through. So we all have this AI or what's it called? Avatar version of us online. And we're all married to our cell phones and the image that we portray online.